The Pentagon Papers came up very, very fast and was gone very fast, essentially the week that the movie takes place in. And it became, just the word itself, the Pentagon Papers, became this identifying pair of words that we weren't sure what they actually meant. And that was one of the Stevens reactions back in February when we read it. It was all about the Pentagon Papers. But what was in the Pentagon Papers? What was so incendiary about it? And so him wanting to infuse the script with a lot more of why they were important, just not that they were important. Coming to grips with what her place is going to be in the grand history of the Washington Post. Her father gave it to her husband, and her husband is no longer there, and so she is officially the person who was in charge of not just the newspaper, but the entire media empire. There was radio stations and TV stations as well. But she didn't know how to do it. She had always been either the daughter or the wife that was, part of it, but not the person that was in charge. And oddly enough, right at the moment this movie began, the story begins, there was a stock offering. There was either going to be an awful lot of money made or an awful lot of money lost. And there was a committee of men who had advised and helped run and had positions of responsibility on the Washington Post. But she had to, I think, first determine whether or not to run the thing or not. And I think it was hurried up by this fact that the New York Times broke open this huge scoop, mysteriously, and she had this, one guy, Fritz, who was played by Tracy Letts, who was saying you have to be careful, you can't get in trouble by publishing this stuff. And she had Ben Bradlee, played by me, who was saying we are nothing but a second-rate backwater newspaper unless we find this story and run it ourselves. And it is about as clear a yin and a yang, a good or bad decision that Kay Graham had to make, as personified by Meryl Streep. So it's really that story. Ben Bradlee was a newspaper man through and through. He loved the business and he loved what the job was. He loved what the job was, to find the truth, discern what it is, and put it out there and let people decide for themselves. His coming to the Washington Post a few years earlier was based on this constant dynamism of what the daily charge is for journalists, for his journalism, which is you must get it right that day. Because if you're wrong, you're going to have to eat that inaccuracy for a very, very, very long time. If you do get it right, if you do tell the truth, the only thing you get from is the opportunity to try to do it again the very next day. So he's a newspaper man. If you run the story, you'll go to jail and you'll affect the stock offering. You'll hurt. Mrs. Graham is going to be responsible for it. You could ruin everything if you decide to go against in this case, the Nixon White House and the Justice Department. But Ben Bradlee and many other people there just said, there's no reason to have a First Amendment if we can't do this. And so it was an extremely dangerous call at the time. Now it's like, you can print almost anything and nobody says boo. But at that point, that brand of truth was so volatile that they didn't know if cops were going to come knocking on their doors or if the federal marshals were going to come in and smash up the printing presses in order to keep them going. And Ben Bradlee didn't know if he would have a job or if he would have a convict serial number on his chest when it was all done. It was really, it's amazing that so much was at stake over printing the truth as it had existed for decades on these other pieces of paper. He just knew that he had a big personality. He knew that he had an interest and a curiosity. He knew he had the tools, both as a classic journalist, but also as that motivator of people, that person that could not just cajole, but could also challenge and move forward. He knew that that he never lied, and and no one who ever spoke to him ever dared lie. But if it was bad news, he took it the same way as he took good news, which is, all right, well, let's deal with this and let's get on to whatever the next step was. Meryl, or as I call her, Miss Streep, she has 3 or 4 moments of pure cinema that are magnified by the place that they come in the movie. It's one thing to have a cool line and a cool shot and have a cool beat in a movie, but it's something else in order to have them play out when the entire movie is hanging in the balance and you're on the edge of their seat. Stephen he's a great regulator of the tempo and the timbre of a scene. He will ignore moments that you think are important and come in specifically on moments that you didn't even see as being all that necessary, because he's looking at some other aspect of the scene. He would come up to me and he would ask for a little more voice. He would ask for some other kind of more like specifics, but he would also then periodically come by and say, "Don't be so sure of yourself." I said, "Wow, I love that. Not so sure." Or other times he would say, "Come in, don't say anything. Just watch and observe." And that's a lot of times that's the antithesis of what actors want to do, but it's actually it's the perfection of what can be screen acting, because then you're just being as opposed to pontificating.